Theodora here. Let's see. Theodora?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so is there an announcement by organizers? Mahir, do you have an announcement before the session or not? If not, I'm going to start now.
You can start.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So, dear colleagues, this is our 7th session today. So we will not have more divided sessions. We will continue one session from now on. All meeting will be the same. So we have 2 invited presentation, keynote presentation, and I will not tell much about the Serhan and the following presenter, Gordon. Most of you know them, and they are very well-known, eminent scientists. Serhan is from Turkey, and he works on fish mainly, but not only fish, aquatic species. So he will talk about the ecological impact of invasive alien species, aquatic species. And this is your floor, please, Serhan.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm very happy to talk about my main subject area. Actually, that's why I'm very happy. Ahmet introduced me very well, actually, but I'm from Muğla Koçman University. I also affiliated in the Łódź University in Poland. I'm kind of external fellowship there. Then, like I said, I'm going to talk about the ecological impacts of aquatic invasive alien species, and I will give some more information about how it is to sustainable management approach. But the main talk will be on the actually ecological impacts. So I'm giving some quick info what I'm going to talk about. First, I will start with what is the invasive species. I know I'm conscious of that the main topic of main scope of this symposium on invasive species, but I will link this issue to impact. Actually, that's why I'm going to give some recent kind of interesting studies on invasive species, and then I will talk about what types of impact of invasive species. Then I'm going to switch a bit to ecological impact and why it's so important to understand why we are dealing with this issue so intensively. And maybe more importantly, I will talk about how we are predicting it, especially giving some examples in the field and for the experimental studies and how they combine together. And I'm going to conclude my talk with this sustainable. What is it to do sustainable management? Why is it important for the sustainable management? How we can use it for the management issues. Then giving some recommendations for future work. So, as you already know, invasive species is one of the main threats to the biodiversity, conservation of biodiversity. But recent study of recent report by IUCN are giving some kind of dramatic actually figures, like over 85,000 species assessed, more than 900 species extinct, which is quite concerning figure actually. But maybe more concerning issue is that invasive species are responsible alone of the 16% of all the species extinctions. But this is more problematic when they when they act interactively with some other threats. Synergistically, this rate would be up to 41%, and this is really high rate, I may say. And invasive predators, this is one of the recent studies clearly indicated that especially the predators is quite important. I mean, giving some severe effect in a short time. And then the reason responsible for the extinctions, this study clearly showed 87 birds, 45 mammals, and 10 reptile species extinct just because of the invasive predators. So these kind of studies are been increasing, and maybe more. This is kind of very new paper which is still in press. I think it's not published fully bibliographically, but it's quite interesting. That's why I want to put it here. It is also even the case these kind of invasive species impacts for the planetary biosecurity issues. I mean, this can be coming from the kind of extraterrestrially from the space to Earth, and vice versa. For instance, it's quite interesting that in the paper it mentioned that kind of Israel lunar lander named Bereshit. This belongs to a private organization, and it crashed on the moon. Then it was carrying thousands of dormant target rates. This is kind of invertebrate, quite tolerant to very harsh conditions. They can survive very withstand harsh conditions. So we don't know actually what will happen after this crash and more than thousands of dormant target rates kind of introduced on the moon. Well, probably it's highly unlikely that we would see anything significant, because there was probably no any other living creatures on the moon. But this is the case that just a kind of concerning kind of warning thing, because we know some kind of certain bacteria, so-called Arthropacter from ancient Arctic permafrost. They show that they can survive, especially kind of environments which is similar to Martian permafrost. So these kind of things, maybe it's not, like I said, it's not so likely to be happening, but from especially if they come from the space to the Earth, then maybe we should be more concerning about, especially in terms of the biosecurity thing issue. And there are 4 stages, very important 4 stages, starting from the transportation to the impact. And these are the very important stage for any non-native species to be established, starting from the transportation to be giving some very serious impact. So any kind of species that is introduced to any other environment that have to pass this stage successfully, I mean, survive all of this stage. So as you see, after the spread, the most important point is the ecological impact. So but here we need to know also some other factors, like this is also a very recent paper which examining to the sleeper populations. So there is this issue also that we should take into consideration, that especially some populations go undetected for a long time until becoming kind of threshold abundance or something like that, so that maybe years, maybe decades, we shouldn't know if these species can be given some serious impact or not. But it is highly related with their high abundance. But this paper also showed that clearly some environmental factors can trigger this, the exceeding of reaching of this threshold to be more invasive and start to impact detrimentally to biota or flora or fauna. So another paper, which is also quite interesting for this stage, how this stage are important. Maybe we can see from this paper that this is this is showing that there is high similarity between the emergent zoonotic viruses and the stage for biological invasions. This is also quite a new paper, maybe published a couple of months ago. But as you see from the figure, that it's quite clear that the older stages of this is quite this is quite popular now because of the COVID situation. But as you see, if you want to understand actual, the process from starting from the interaction to impact. In this case, impact, unfortunately, the death of people. But when you look at the similarities, there is really high rate of similarity, so that we can use this invasion science, which is quite a new area actually, to predict also the impacts and taking some precautionary management measurements. So the main impact, I'm coming to a little bit the main impact, main topic of my talk is impact. So there could be ecological impacts and also some other kind of ignored, maybe some neglected issue, that economic impacts, which is usually positive. But I'm going to focus more on the negative impacts in this talk. But we shouldn't forget that also there is this economic positive impacts, but they can also be negative impacts, which I'm going to talk about a little bit in the next slides. But as you see, producing a new aquatic species, fisheries for purposes of providing food, and an aquarium trade is one of the maybe most large trade in the world now, and it is also carrying high risk of many things in terms of especially impact. And it can be recreation or biological control, but all of these logistically economic impacts also can be interpreted as maybe some kind of negative impacts. For instance, these ventures started 2 years ago, so-called InvaCost. They are specifically focusing on the negative, economic loss. And there are some interesting figures that, as you see, over 1.2 trillion a minimum loss just before the past few decades, between 1917 and 2017. So this is also, when you consider how big this kind of cost would be. As you see, for instance, they estimated that annual mean cost could reach 122.8 billion only 1 year, only 2017. So this is kind of, we shouldn't ignore, and I know there is still quite little information in that case. For instance, we started to collect data for Turkey just a couple of months ago, but we found out that there was almost nothing there. So this was the case for all other countries, but within the 2 years, they managed to gather really nice data together, and then they published now over 50 really nice peer-reviewed articles within only 3.5 years. So this is something that we should also be focusing on. So what are the ecological impacts? I will give some examples for each of these components, but it will start with the direct predation, which is quite actually, like I said before, one of the severe and harsh impacts, because it can quickly cause extinction of some species. But competitive interactions with the native species is maybe long term, but in the end, it also could really detrimentally affect the other species, especially native species. introduction of new disease or parasites, which is also quite something important that we shouldn't, like I said, neglect. And the hybridization and alteration of the or degradation of the environment also, which is can be counted in the detrimental ecological impacts. So I'm going to give some examples, just a one slide example for each component, but this is also quite important. I'm giving this example because it's quite popular, common example, which also gives you to not only ecological impacts, but in the end economic and health issues impacts. This is from one of the biggest lakes in the world, from the Africa, Victoria Lake. They introduced this Nile perch, Lattes niloticus, to these lakes, just the kind of increasing the economical structure of the area, because they are quite poor, and usually their tribes are fighting each other. So they think maybe that would be a good thing, just the eating the other kind of lots of varieties of haplochromines. As you see, there are varieties of colorful small fishes which cannot be utilized by the people, but when Nile perch predated and become dominant in the lake, they thought maybe it would be a good thing for the economy, especially of the area. But it turned out it's a kind of ecological disaster in the end. So there is this really big problems within the kind of decades maybe. And it's there is this documentary. I strongly recommend to see it. You can find it also from the YouTube. It's more than 3 hours documentary, but it's quite interesting. It started from the one species introduction, maybe in that time kind of innocent, but in the end they started to gun trafficking, and also some more fighting within the tribes, and also some habitat degradation, because they had to cut all the forest, almost all the forest, just to cook this Nile perch, because there's the cooking style of it, just the with the smoke. So in the end, it's starting from very simple, innocent introduction to the total disaster in terms of ecological, economical, and health issues. So competition, like I said, this is something that we shouldn't ignore. Actually, this is quite small Asiatic member of carp family, and coming from the China, appeared in mainland Europe in 1960s, but now it is in one 2010 paper, it was considered as the most invasive vertebrate species in the world, because the main problem with this fish species is not only the competitive being superior competitive, but also it carries it is kind of health carrier of this emerging infectious disease, so-called Spirochetum destrians. This is kind of intracellular bacterial disease, but it's when infected to other species, like that can be they can be riverine fish, endemic native fish species also, but also some aquaculture industry, important for aquaculture industry, like salmon species. But the effect is the same, the mass mortalities, and the kind of identical impact, it can be operated at the global scale. So this is definitely threatening biodiversity, but with different angles, like maybe recreational fishing, also aquaculture industry industry. And this is the paper that we published in 2015. We found it in Turkey for the first time, actually, because it was only experimentally in the lab. They found it in 2005. And then after our paper, it was also discovered in some other regions in Europe. But as you see, I just want to take your attention to how much cost it could create only one species, and not only one species, but the disease that it carries. It says that between 600 and 4,200 million moths, I mean, loss of food for these numbers of moths per year. So this is just kind of estimate, but it's quite concerning. Hybridization is another problem, especially this is the case with freshwater fish species, especially in the cyprinid family, because they are quite close usually, and then most of the time they interbreed easily. But when any invasive species is the case, it's kind of it can create dangerous outcomes, especially causing a loss of genetic integrity. So this is taken from the a picture taken from the England. As you see, there was a very big problem with the goldfish affecting on crucian carp. You see, it's not easy to distinguish actually on the field, but this is obvious case that there is this hybridization, and then it affects especially this threatened fish species in there. I can give many more similar examples like this. And the another impact is coming from the environmental degradation. It is also for the grass carp, especially when it introduced also outside of their natural range. The purpose was usually to you know maintain the biological control of aquatic macrophytes, but in the end this is quite greedy species, and this can in the end lead overgrazing, causing some increased turbidity, algae blooms, and degraded water quality. So this is quite important also. This is something that, you know, maybe in first place it started with quite, like I said, with in the Nile perch. It started with quite innocent, maybe with good intention, just the controlling of aquatic macrophytes, but in the end, was the case for the...
Excuse me, Saran. Colleagues, could you please turn your microphones off, except the speaker. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And this is not the kind of limited to fish also, of course, because I'm giving the examples most of fish because I'm working on the freshwater fish, especially their impact. But it's also a case for kind of the other species groups like invertebrates. This is not introduced in Turkey yet. I mean, at least we believe so. But it's coming from the freshwater habitats in the United States and introduced into the Africa and Europe, and it becomes quite pest species because of the impacts are the overgrazing of microphytes and loss of natural habitats. They are quite burrowing behavior that cause serious impact in the native fauna, biota. Sorry, and also this is another quite nuisance invasive species as a water plant is so-called floating pennywort. It's also coming from the North America, but it introduced also the range of for aquaria and garden ponds, which is kind of one of the component of the aquarium trade, like I mentioned before. And it's quite pest in the Europe, and its impact to the native fauna, like rapid growth, leads to the shading of water column. And then when it shades the water column, it means that it can ruin actually all the ecosystem structure from top down and bottom up, actually. So this is really nice paper which summarize what are the global ecological impacts of invasive species in the aquatic ecosystems. They basically concluded that these impacts are quite prominent, that pronounced actually, especially to macrophytes, zooplankton and fish. They found surprisingly, maybe the strong evidence of decreased species diversity, maybe this is because of the pseudo diversity of coming from the invasive space, number of invasive species. But invaded habitats, it's especially like I mentioned in the previous slide, it increased the water turbidity, nitrogen, and organic matter concentration, which combinedly suggested habitat alteration, so that it's when it drives to eutrophication, it is really a big problem for any kind of ecosystem. And invasive macrophytes, maybe the other surprisingly result of this study, that it is the main driver of the largest decreases in the fish abundance. So because the fish usually depending on these the macrophytes, but these macrophytes becomes dominant and they are invasive, then this is another big problem. And the filtering activity of filter collectors like some bivalves, like the ESENIAS species. These are the actually they say, you know, kind of in a wrong way that they clear the water. No, actually they cleared the water with the depleted the planktonic communities, and then that means a big problem also for the you know structuring ecosystem structure from, like I mentioned before, from top down and bottom up effects. And not maybe surprisingly here, that the banting invertebrates were most negatively affected by the introduction of new predators, because they are small and they're quite, you know, undefended. So in case of predator invasive species, they are quite fragile and sensitive to these impacts. So I'm going to talk about a bit how to predict ecological impacts, but before giving some examples with the indirect and direct examples, we should know that these invasions and their impacts are actually quite difficult to predict. So this is because it is issue of the context dependencies. Even the neighboring areas, it is quite you know concerning, and it can be changed even the neighboring environment to seek these impacts. So I will talk about how to measure it actually, but I just wanted to know that it is not the easy task. So there is these ways that we could follow, starting from the field observation, long-term monitoring maybe, and the comparisons of the biological features in the natural conditions, in allopatry and sympatric conditions. But it's also possible to do it with the direct experimental studies, but they should be combining style. So I will give some examples. I think I'm running off time, right? Do I have still time, or just because I'm seeing that I'm just reaching over in my time, right?
You almost finished your time. You have 3 more minutes to finish.
Okay, I will speed up then. Okay.
But you can continue. It's very interesting.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay, thank you, Theodora. Okay. You know, these examples is from the kind of indirect, as the title says, circumstantial evidence they can provide. Actually, this is kind of study that we did it in a mesotrophic reservoir in Turkey during my PhD. It is kind of started to 2002, from 2002 to 2007. We were able to monitor actually the non-native species, which is gibel carp, and then all the other native species. Then we clearly saw that there is this pattern that when the gibel carp are increasing, the native is decreasing in terms of duration of spawning. We didn't see anything about the growth, for instance, but the reproductive features are quite affected by the Gibble curve. But this is, like I said, there are many other factors that we should take into consideration. So this is not only the case of the introduction of the kind of Gibble curve here or some other spaces. Maybe we should be monitoring lots of other factors, because nature is quite diverse. But there are this way, at least you can see these change during the time by just monitoring these kind of simultaneously the non-natives and native spaces. So this is another study that we conducted with Gordon. There was a British Council grant granted to me and Gordon, me from Turkey, he's from the UK, but we all did the studies in Epping Forest, which is located in the northeast England. So we were lucky enough to find different ponds, and these different ponds consisting of these kind of sets of spaces that we exactly wanted to be. For instance, one pond including only goldfish, the other only crucian carp, which is threatened. The goldfish is an invasive one, and then some other ponds consisting of the both. So we were able to compare the many things actually for mainly the life history traits and some plant invertebrate communities. Then we concluded some significant results, but still, as you see in the title, it is kind of preliminary assessment, because we would never know, how some other factors could affecting these results. And this can be done directly by some niche modeling, actually, not niche modeling, but isotopic niche studies. This is something study that conducted by kind of spatio-temporal design in Japan, and we were able to see the increasing abundance is impacting differently the fish species, especially their interactions on the whole lake scale. As you see, when you do it with the during the time and during the space, then you could see a very significant impact in the end. So I'm concluding quickly. This is also possible to do that with the direct, actually, kind of comparative functional response and relative invader potential impact experiments. As they are quite up-to-date contemporary techniques now that can be used quite commonly. And in last couple of years, these kind of studies has been increasing significantly, and then we are now trying to do the same thing with some different sets of invasive and native species. But it's quite useful, I may say, and you could also see kind of density-dependent impacts when you use this kind of aquarium and tank experiments. For instance, in this study, they were able to see the increased abundance, causing higher establishment probability, so greater impact on the prey communities. So how the increasing abundance increase not only some physical characters like chlorophyll A and some other nitrogen, total phosphorus, but also some other native species, how they are affected, belonging in different groups. And you could do it with some kind of pond mesocosms, the pond enclosures. When you use these experiments in the nature, but semi-controlled experiments, it is quite useful. And you can see after a couple of months, you can directly compare what happened with this new introduction of non-native species to native species. So this is also quite possible to use stable isotope analysis in the mesocosm and small ponds. They could be natural ponds, by the way. And then this can be compared with the wild invaded communities. Actually, this is quite the modern way to do it combinedly. This paper is one of the most pioneering of such studies, which is published in this year, 2021, and I was lucky enough to be reviewer of this paper. As you see, they used functional responses, isotopic niche in aquaria, small tanks, natural small ponds, and in the end wild ponds, and they compare all of the results to conclude the quite strong outcome if there is an impact or not. So this is the way actually when you do it controlled, semi-controlled, and combined with the wild data, in the end you can clearly see the real world of impact actually. So my final slides is, this is, like I said, it's not so easy to predict. There are ways, like I said, but the management is challenging. So when you want to eradication, it's usually not possible. But no matter what, you need to quite sound, strong, powerful scientific basis how to implement the management measures, and this is quite depending on the data that you will acquire from this kind of experiments and the studies in the nature. So the future work is this is my intention for working, but I think it can be generalized as a common approach, because it's now quite becoming popular to do this climate modeling, especially combined with the niche modeling. This is a study that we did with my dear colleagues in Turkey. We were able to see these rainbow trout, how they be spread in the Turkey scale, and then when you do find the overlapping areas, then you can get these maybe preventationary measures just before this species was becoming dominant, becoming invasive. Then you can take some very useful measurements just to prevent this detrimental impact in happening. So this is so-called what-if scenarios that we were just able to pull this study off in terms of these species has never been encountered yet. These Copaeta idenensis is an endemic species in the Muğla region here, but the pumpkin seed has never encountered with the species. But we just thought that what if they come across? So we just combined this. We just did this experiment only for the growth, and then we found out that there would be some significant results of this encountering. Okay, I'm really sorry. I'm just over my time, but then hopefully I didn't bore you too much. Then I don't keep you waited too much, because after me there will be a great talk by Gordon. So sorry for if I steal from his time. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much. It was very nice presentation. You started from the far space to the deep water. So then it was really interesting. And so we will wait aliens more from the outside of the planet. Okay, I would like to have some questions. I think, is Gordon here already? No, so we have time, and we can have few questions. If you have some questions, please raise your hand and use the hand raising. Okay. Yes, Theodora.
I just want to congratulate Serhan for his talk.
Thank
It
you.
was really very interesting and impressive. Thank you. I don't
Thank you,
know,
Heather.
I don't have questions, but it was really very good review of the impact.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very
Thank
much.
you for this.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Another one? Any questions? Okay, so thank you very much, Saran. Actually,
Thank you for giving me
Volkan is not
opportunity.
here
Thank you.
yet, but we can continue with the next presentation if our colleague is here.